Very often the deepest weariness of the soul does not come from suffering itself, but from the exhausting belief that we must personally untangle every knot of our lives. We wake each morning with the invisible weight of questions pressing against our chest. How will this be fixed? What must I do next? Where did I go wrong? And though no voice announces it aloud, the heart quietly assumes that the burden of resolution has been placed squarely upon our own shoulders. We treat life as though it were a complicated riddle handed to us by a distant examiner, one who will only approve of us if we produce the correct answers unaided. Yet there are moments, often uninvited, often gentle, when another message interrupts this tiring assumption. It does not shout, it does not argue, it simply says, with a firmness that brings relief rather than fear, "This is not yours to solve, it is mine." This idea unsettles us at first, because we have been trained to equate responsibility with control. From childhood onward, we are praised for managing, mastering, and making sense of things. The one who admits confusion is pitied, the one who admits helplessness is scolded. And so we learn to disguise our dependence even from ourselves. We pray, perhaps, but only after exhausting every strategy we can devise. We ask for guidance, but only in ways that do not interfere with our carefully drawn plans. In practice, we treat God less like a father and more like a consultant, invited to advise, but never to take over. Yet the words "it's mine" do not come as a suggestion. They arrive as a correction. There is something profoundly humbling about realizing that the universe does not hinge upon our cleverness. The sun rises without consulting our calendars. The heart beats while we sleep, unconcerned with our opinions about it. Even the most brilliant mind cannot add a single hour to its own life, and still, we behave as though the ultimate outcome of our struggles rests on the sharpness of our thinking or the intensity of our worry. We confuse anxiety with effort, as though fretting were a form of participation. But worry, in truth, is often an attempt to steal ownership of things that were never entrusted to us in the first place. When God says, "It is not yours to solve," He is not dismissing us as unimportant. Quite the opposite. He is freeing us from a role we were never designed to play. A child does not insult his father by admitting he cannot lift the roof or repair the foundations of the house. He honors him by trusting that such matters are already in stronger hands. Likewise, there are problems in our lives that are roof-level problems, structural, deep, and far beyond the reach of human strength. To pretend otherwise is not bravery, it is confusion. We often imagine faith as a kind of heroic confidence, a bold stride into the unknown armed with spiritual certainty. But faith, more often than not, begins as a quiet surrender of our illusions. It begins when we stop insisting that everything must make sense to us before it can be true. The demand to understand everything is, at its core, a demand to remain in charge. And yet, the most important truths in life have never waited for our understanding before acting upon us. Love does not ask permission from logic before it changes us. Grief does not explain itself before it wounds us. Grace does not require our comprehension before it redeems us. There is a strange peace that comes when we finally admit that we are not the authors of the story, but characters within it. Characters with real choices, yes, but not with editorial control over the plot. We are allowed to respond, to obey, to trust, but not to dictate outcomes. When we try to seize the pen, the story grows distorted. We write ourselves into scenes we were never meant to inhabit, and we wonder why the narrative feels strained and joyless. But when we let the author remain the author, even the chapters we do not understand begin to carry meaning beyond our immediate grasp. Consider how often we exhaust ourselves trying to fix what is actually meant to form us. We see delay as failure, waiting as punishment, and uncertainty as a flaw in the system. But what if these are not errors to be corrected, but instruments being carefully used? A sculptor does not apologize to the stone for the pressure of the chisel. A teacher does not reveal every answer before the lesson has done its work. In the same way, God does not rush to resolve every tension simply because we are uncomfortable with it. Some problems are not obstacles, they are classrooms. This does not mean that we are passive spectators, reclining while heaven does all the labor. There is work for us to do, but it is not the work of omnipotence. Our task is obedience, not orchestration. We are asked to walk, not to map the entire journey. The command, "Follow me," never comes with a full itinerary. And perhaps that is because knowing every step in advance would destroy the very trust the journey is meant to cultivate. Trust cannot exist where control is absolute. We misunderstand God when we assume that His silence implies absence. Often, silence is simply the refusal to indulge our demand for premature clarity. A parent watching a child learn to walk does not intervene at every wobble. There is a watchful love that allows room for growth, even at the cost of scraped knees. In the same way, God may be nearer to us in our confusion than in our moments of triumph, nearer in the unanswered question than in the resolved one. The declaration, "It's mine," is not abandonment, it is guardianship. Many of us would rather carry unbearable burdens than relinquish them. There is a perverse comfort in being overwhelmed by problems we believe we control. At least then, the failure feels familiar, almost respectable. Trusting God, on the other hand, exposes us to a different kind of vulnerability. If He truly takes ownership, then we must accept outcomes we cannot manage or predict. We must accept that His wisdom may offend our preferences, and yet it is precisely this surrender that allows rest to enter the soul. Rest is not the absence of difficulty, it is the absence of self-dependence. A person may be surrounded by storms and yet sleep soundly if he trusts the ship is in capable hands. Conversely, a person may stand on calm waters and still be tormented if he believes he must personally prevent the tide from turning. When God says, "It's mine," He is inviting us into rest that does not depend on circumstances, but on confidence in His character. We are often tempted to treat prayer as a strategy session, a place to persuade God to adopt our solutions. But real prayer begins when we stop explaining and start listening. It begins when we bring Him not just our requests, but our assumptions, our frantic plans, our need to be right. Sometimes the most honest prayer is not, "Here is what I need you to do," but "Here is what I'm afraid to let go of." And in that vulnerable space, the voice returns, steady and unthreatened. "You do not have to solve this. You only have to trust me with it." There is a profound difference between responsibility and ownership. We are responsible for faithfulness, honesty, love, and obedience. We are not responsible for outcomes, timing, or ultimate resolution. Confusing the two leads to spiritual burnout. We become resentful, not because God asked too much, but because we have assumed duties He never assigned. The yoke feels heavy because it is not the one He offered us. Think of how many sleepless nights are spent rehearsing conversations that may never happen, imagining disasters that may never come, replaying mistakes that cannot be undone. We call this preparation, but it is often just fear wearing a respectable disguise. Fear wants control because it does not trust goodness. Faith releases control because it does. When God claims a situation as His own, He is not merely asserting power, He is offering reassurance that goodness, not chaos, stands at the center of reality. This truth changes how we face uncertainty. Instead of asking, "How will this end?" we begin to ask, "How should I live today?" Instead of demanding answers, we practice obedience. Instead of clinging to explanations, we cling to promises. And slowly, almost without noticing, the soul begins to loosen its grip. The clenched fist opens, the shoulders drop, breathing becomes easier, not because the problem has vanished, but because its weight has shifted to stronger hands. We must be careful not to turn surrender into a slogan, saying God is in control while secretly trying to control everything. Ourselves is not faith, it is contradiction. True surrender is often uncomfortable. It feels like standing on the edge of understanding and choosing not to step back. It means continuing to act rightly, even when results remain hidden. It means resisting the urge to measure God's faithfulness by immediate success. There are seasons when God allows us to see how He solves things, and seasons when He asks us to trust Him without the privilege of explanation. Both are gifts, though the latter does not feel like one at first. We would rather be impressed than transformed. But God seems more interested in shaping our hearts than satisfying our curiosity. The mystery we resent today may become the foundation of our wisdom tomorrow. When you hear the words, "It's not yours to solve," do not hear dismissal. Hear invitation. You are being invited out of exhaustion and into dependence, out of anxiety and into trust, out of self-reliance and into communion. You are being reminded that you are not alone in a universe that demands answers from you, but held in a universe that already has an answer. And perhaps the greatest challenge is not believing that God can solve what we cannot, but believing that He will do so in a way that is truly good, even if it contradicts our expectations. We want solutions that preserve our comfort, our image, our timelines. God often chooses solutions that preserve our souls. And so the struggle continues, not between faith and doubt, but between surrender and control, between letting God be God and insisting on being something we were never meant to be. And in that quiet tension, as the mind reaches again for certainty and the heart wavers between fear and trust, the same gentle, unwavering truth continues to surface, asking not for understanding, but for willingness, asking not for mastery, but for faithfulness, reminding us again and again, even as the questions persist and the path remains partially hidden, that the burden we are gripping so tightly was never placed there by Him, and that the moment we loosen our hold, we may begin to sense, not yet fully, not clearly enough to explain, but deeply enough to feel, that something greater is already at work, shaping outcomes beyond our vision, weaving purpose through confusion, and inviting us, step by step, to walk forward without answers, without guarantees, but with the growing realization that the story is still unfolding and that the hands guiding it have never once let go. There is a peculiar resistance within us to this idea, a stubborn reflex that flinches at the thought of surrender even when surrender promises relief. We fear that if we stop striving to solve everything, life will unravel into chaos. Yet this fear assumes that chaos is kept at bay by our vigilance, as though the world would immediately collapse if we were to loosen our grip for even a moment. This assumption flatters our importance while quietly draining our strength. The truth, far less dramatic and far more comforting, is that the world has been held together long before we arrived, and it will not fall apart simply because we finally admit our limits. We tend to believe that letting God take ownership of a problem means we must stop caring about it. But care and control are not the same thing. One can care deeply without attempting to dominate outcomes. In fact, the deepest care often expresses itself through trust. A farmer cares for the field by planting and tending, but he does not command the rain. He prepares the soil and waits, knowing that growth obeys laws beyond his reach. His waiting is not laziness, it is wisdom. And so it is with us. We are called to plant acts of faithfulness, patience, and obedience, and then to wait without panic for what only God can produce. The difficulty lies in the waiting. We are creatures of immediacy, accustomed to instant results and swift explanations. Silence unnerves us. Delay feels like denial, but what we call delay may simply be God working at a depth we cannot yet perceive. Roots grow in darkness, unseen, long before fruit appears. To judge the health of the tree by the absence of visible growth is to misunderstand how life works. Yet we do this constantly with our own spiritual journey, concluding too quickly that nothing is happening simply because nothing is obvious. When God says, "It's mine," He is also saying, "You cannot rush this," and that may be the most difficult lesson of all. We want solutions that match our urgency, resolutions that conform to our schedules. But God is not hurried, not because He is indifferent, but because He sees the end from the beginning. What feels like slowness to us may be precision to Him. What feels like neglect may be careful restraint. And so we are invited to learn a patience that is not passive but attentive, a patience that listens, watches, and remains faithful even when progress seems invisible. There is also a subtle pride that resists surrender. We like to believe that our insight, our planning, our relentless effort are what stand between order and disaster. To admit otherwise feels like shrinking. But humility is not shrinkage, it is alignment. It is the soul stepping into its proper size. no longer straining to be infinite. Pride exhausts because it demands that we be more than we are. Humility rests because it allows God to be who He is. Often, the problems we try hardest to solve are the very ones God is using to teach us trust. We pray for their removal, not realizing that their persistence is part of the lesson. This does not mean God delights in our discomfort. It means He values our transformation more than our convenience. Comfort rarely teaches us to rely on anything beyond ourselves. Discomfort, on the other hand, exposes our fragility and invites us to lean on a strength not our own. We must also confront the fear that if God takes ownership, He may choose a path we would not choose. This fear is not unfounded. He often does. His ways have a habit of disrupting our preferences, overturning our expectations, and challenging our definitions of success. But this disruption is not cruelty, it is correction. We mistake familiarity for goodness and control for safety. God sees beyond both. Consider how often we cling to answers simply because they are familiar, even when they have proven inadequate. We replay the same mental strategies, the same emotional responses, hoping for a different outcome. We call this perseverance, but it may simply be repetition. God's declaration that the problem is His is sometimes an invitation to stop repeating ourselves and to start listening. It is an interruption of our cycles, a chance to step out of patterns that no longer serve us. Trusting God does not mean suppressing questions. Questions are not enemies of faith, they are often its companions. But there is a difference between asking questions in humility and demanding answers as a condition for obedience. The first opens the heart, the second hardens it. God is not threatened by our questions, but He will not submit to our ultimatums. He asks for trust not because He lacks evidence, but because trust is the relationship He desires. When we finally accept that some things are not ours to solve, we begin to notice how much mental space has been occupied by unnecessary strain. We realize how many thoughts have been looping endlessly, producing nothing but fatigue. Releasing these does not make us irresponsible. It makes us available. Available to listen, to love, to respond to what is actually in front of us, wrath. Rather than being consumed by what might be, there is a quiet joy in this availability. It is not loud or dramatic. It does not announce itself with fireworks. It simply settles in, like a gentle warmth, when the soul stops fighting realities it cannot change. This joy does not depend on circumstances improving. It depends on alignment being restored. When the soul stops pretending to be sovereign, it can finally breathe. We must also learn to recognize the difference between effort and strain. God often calls us to effort. Effort in loving difficult people, in choosing integrity, in remaining faithful when it would be easier to compromise. But strain comes from carrying what was never assigned to us. Effort energizes because it aligns us with purpose. Strain drains because it pits us against reality. When God says, "It's mine," He is relieving us of strain, not excusing us from effort. There is something deeply relational about this exchange. God does not say, "Ignore the problem." He says, "Give it to me." This implies proximity, involvement, and care. It implies that He is not a distant ruler issuing commands from afar, but a present guide inviting us to walk with Him. The problem does not disappear into abstraction. It is placed into hands that bear scars, hands that know suffering from the inside. We often underestimate how personal God's involvement is. We imagine Him dealing only in grand events and sweeping histories, leaving us to manage the smaller details. But the distinction between large and small matters more to us than to Him. A child's scraped knee matters as much to a loving parent as a broken bone. Likewise, the worries we dismiss as trivial may be precisely the ones God is inviting us to entrust to Him. Entrustment requires honesty. We cannot hand over what we refuse to acknowledge. Many of us hide our deepest fears behind competence, our doubts behind busyness. We keep moving, solving, fixing, not because we are confident, but because stopping would force us to confront how little control we actually have. God's invitation cuts through this pretense. It calls us to bring the whole mess, our confusion, our frustration, our fear of failure, and to place it before Him without editing. This honesty is uncomfortable because it exposes our vulnerability. But vulnerability is not weakness in the economy of faith. It is currency. It is what allows relationship to deepen. God does not require polished prayers or well-constructed arguments. He responds to truth. And sometimes the truest thing we can say is, "I don't know what to do anymore." When we reach that point, something shifts. The mind, exhausted from trying to calculate every possible outcome, begins to quiet. The heart, weary from bracing against imagined disasters, begins to soften. We may not feel immediate relief, but we sense a subtle change in posture. We are no longer standing rigidly against the storm, we are learning to lean. Leaning is not the same as collapsing. It is a choice to rely without giving up. It is an act of faith that continues to move forward, even when the destination remains unclear. This is often how God works, not by removing uncertainty, but by teaching us how to live within it without fear. There will be moments when we forget this, moments when anxiety resurfaces, when the old habit of control tightens its grip. This does not mean we have failed, it means we are human. Trust is not a single decision made once and for all, it is a posture we return to repeatedly. Each time we notice ourselves taking back what we have surrendered, we are invited, again gently, to release it once more. God's patience with us in this process is remarkable. He does not scold us for struggling to trust. He understands the depth of our conditioning, the years spent believing that everything depends on us. He meets us where we are, not where we imagine we should be. And each time we loosen our grip, even slightly, He meets that movement with grace. There is also a mysterious strength that comes from knowing the outcome does not depend on us. Far from making us passive, this knowledge can make us courageous. When we are no longer driven by the need to secure results, we are free to act rightly regardless of consequences. We can speak truth without obsessing over how it will be received. We can love generously without calculating returns. We can obey without demanding guarantees. This freedom is unsettling at first because it strips away our usual motivations. We are accustomed to acting in order to control outcomes. When that motivation is removed, we must confront why we do what we do. Obedience for its own sake, love for its own sake, faithfulness without visible reward. These are unfamiliar territories, but they are also where genuine transformation occurs. God's claim over our problems is not a declaration of distance, but of intimacy. He does not say, "This is mine," to push us away, but to draw us closer. He invites us to participate not as controllers, but as companions. We walk with Him, not ahead of Him. We respond to His guidance, not our fears. And as we walk, we may begin to notice that some problems lose their power over us even before they are resolved. Their ability to dominate our thoughts diminishes. Their presence no longer defines our emotional landscape. They remain, but they no longer reign. This shift is subtle, but profound. It marks the difference between being surrounded by difficulty and being ruled by it. We may also discover that God's solutions are rarely isolated events. They are often processes that reshape us along the way. What we thought was a problem to be eliminated turns out to be a pathway to maturity. What we begged to be removed becomes a place where faith deepens and character forms. And though we may not choose these paths for ourselves, we may one day look back and recognize their necessity. All of this requires a reorientation of how we measure progress. Instead of asking whether circumstances have changed, we begin to ask whether we have changed. Are we more patient, more trusting, more compassionate, more anchored? These are quieter victories, easily overlooked, but they endure long after circumstances shift again. When God says it's mine, He is also redefining success. Success is no longer the immediate resolution of our difficulties, but our growing capacity to trust Him within them. It is no longer about having all the answers, but about knowing the one who does. This redefinition challenges our instincts, but it also offers relief. We are no longer evaluated by outcomes beyond our control, but by faithfulness within our reach. And so the journey continues, not toward a neat conclusion, but toward deeper dependence. The questions may persist, The tension may remain, but something within us begins to settle into a steadier rhythm. We learn, slowly and imperfectly, to release what tightens our chest and to receive what steadies our heart. We learn to recognize the difference between what is ours to do and what is ours to trust. And in the quiet moments, when the noise of striving fades and the need for certainty loosens its grip, we may sense that this posture of surrender is not an ending at all, but an opening. A widening of the soul that allows space for something greater to move, something patient and purposeful, continuing its work beyond our sight, inviting us to keep walking, to keep trusting, to keep listening, even as the path ahead remains unfinished, and the voice that called us to release our grip continues to speak, not in urgency or demand, but with a steady assurance that does not rush us toward resolution, but draws us ever deeper into the unfolding mystery of reliance, where the need to solve gives way to the willingness to follow, and the heart, still learning, still wrestling, remains attentive to that quiet insistence that what we are tempted to seize again has never stopped being held elsewhere, and that the work unfolding beyond our understanding is not paused by our uncertainty, but continues steadily, patiently, inviting us to remain present, to remain open, and to remain willing, even as the next step has yet to fully reveal itself. So let this be the place where striving finally loosens its grip, where the soul no longer argues with the weight it was never meant to carry. Let this be the quiet turning point where control is exchanged for trust, and fear yields to a deeper confidence that does not need to see in order to rest. You have not been asked to hold the world together, nor to decode every mystery before taking the next step. You have been asked to walk, to listen, to remain faithful in the small space entrusted to you, while the greater work continues beyond your reach. And as you release what you cannot solve, may you discover that you are not falling into emptiness, but into care, not surrendering to uncertainty, but leaning into a wisdom that has never failed. For the hands that claim what is not yours to fix are the same hands that formed you, sustain you, and guide you still, steady and sure, carrying the story forward even now.